My name is Paul Steucke. That's like a bowl of stew and a key. The reason I say that is because I've had to explain that numerous times because it comes out as Steucke, which was close to the original, but the one I really don't like is Stoopy. So anyway, we've got that done, pat, okay. I'm in the gallery, and the work here for this show is fantastic. As usual, these shows are really wonderful. A few words about art before I really roll into something tighter, and that is that art is, if I've thought about it, I've been painting for 50 years roughly. I'm 80 years old, and I started at the age of 14 when my father, at my request, purchased a set of oil paints and 4 boards for me, and I did some paintings on those boards and took it to the 7th grade class who oohed and awed. That's all I needed, boy. All an artist needs is a little praise, and it goes a long ways. So I had a good time with that. I went to college at William & Mary in Virginia and got a bachelor's degree in art, fine art. Of course, there's a big difference between fine art and commercial art. I had married a young lady who had 3 children, so I immediately jumped into the business world of trying to earn a living. That was sobering. I joke about the fact, the definition between fine art and commercial art, in that the Sistine Chapel is commercial art, because that fellow had a sponsor who paid the bills. You can be a fine artist all you want, but if you want to pay the bills or eat, you've got to find a way to do it, either work in some other manner or that type of thing. So I did that. I got a degree in commercial art, which is now called graphic design, and the use of the computer has revolutionized that. When I started out, we used to take rub-off letters and rub them down off a sheet and stuff like that. Nowadays, it's a snap. You just pick a font out of there and wham, you're in it. So it's really a handy process to do. I enjoy doing art. The first 18 years of my married life, I did not have a studio, which every painting is a teacher, every single one. You learn from doing whatever it is, whether it's a sculpture or a painting, everyone will teach you something. And that is true of, well, everybody, I guess. I was going to say me. When you don't have a studio and you don't paint for 18 years, you've lost 18 years of life experience. And that's what happened to me. But I've made up for it. I've done a lot of work pieces. Some of my pieces have sold for $20,000, $25,000. Some a lot for 10 and 5. I do my portraits for 8 to 10,000. In the old days when I started out, you needed a gallery, a commercial gallery, because nobody could find you. So in those days, they took 50%, which is the same thing in New York City galleries. So if I sold a painting for $2,000, they took $1,000 right off the top, bang. So if you're thinking about an artist or a young artist and you're thinking about earning a living, you got to think about not only just doing the painting, you got to think of some other things, or you won't eat very often. So that's how that kind of goes. Back to my original thesis by a philosopher who's still around called Eckhart Tolle. And he mentioned in one of his speeches, so to speak, that you live and we all live in the present moment. You can look at the past, you can look at what you want to do in the future, but where you are right now is in the present. Now that present moves rapidly. Boy, does it move into the past very rapidly. But we don't even think about that. We don't think about what that happens. But my point in this is that all artwork is representative in some fashion in the present. You either want to capture a moment like the painting behind me, which is a beach scene, and which was very difficult to paint. I had to paint it twice. Or in abstract work, it's the moment that you create it. Abstract, I've done some abstract work, but it's not who I am. And that's one of the other things, is a student or a new artist, you've got to find out who you are. You have to experiment with other pieces of types and styles, see other people that you like, and then you have to find out who you are in here, because artwork comes from in here. It's basically a form of love. It comes from that format. It comes out of you to somebody else. Now that goes back to that famous proverb, the eye of the beholder, and that is correct. The beholder sees everything differently, as the pieces are in this gallery, for instance, or my piece. But for some of us, at least, it goes back to that present moment, because that's what, no matter whether it's abstract art or whether it's realistic art, you're still capturing the moment. And the other thing about art is, whether it's a big sculpture, Michelangelo's David, or whatever it is, I mean, it's hard to conceive of the fact that he started that piece out of a piece of rock. I mean, just a big block. And look what he created with it. And what he created was something that captures not the moment that he created that piece, but the moment that David represents. When David's posed like that, everybody who walks around it and sees it knows that there's there. I was in Paris recently at I can't remember the name of the museum, or anyway, and I took a picture of a woman they had in a glass case, a sculpture, and she was turned like this, but her eye was looking that way. It stunned me. It stunned me because it was always in the moment. No matter how I looked at that sculpture, it was always in the moment. I could walk around that sculpture and swear that woman was going to talk to me. It's just so stunning. And that's the same thing. Now, the difference in paintings that you hang on a wall, for instance, are that most artwork, and I'd say 99% of it, has to work off the edges of the canvas. They can't, unless you paint on a mural wall, but there are exceptions, but most of what you see is pushing off the sides of that canvas. So the dynamics of the graphics, or the dynamics of what's happening, and I'll use an example on this painting here. This is the image that I'm talking about, how everything in here pushes off one of these sides, one of these images. And we call it the design. The design is, no matter what piece you look at, the design has to push off these edges. And this painting happens to be pretty subtle in that direction, but it's there. It is pushing off these directions. And that's how it works. That's how every piece in the room works. It has to push off those directions, unless it's a sculpture. Of course, that's all three-dimensional. But we'll stick to this type of subject. In this painting, the ocean is very thin because it's the source but not the subject. The rocks give you a perspective as to what is going on the beach. And what I was trying to capture was the moment that this occurs. Now you get this in your head, and then you go back to the studio and you paint. That's quite a gap between when it occurred and when you paint it. But you still have to have in your heart what you wanted to capture and what you wanted to do. So this water comes in, wets the sand, and then leaves. And what it leaves behind is a sheen which will last about 60 seconds. And then it soaks into the sand. It's kind of plain air, only on the beach. So there's a little humor involved in this in a moment. My mother-in-law was about 80. She looked at this painting after it was finished, and she said, "I really like the muskrat down here." And so everybody laughed, of course, because it's a rock, not a muskrat. The other thing I'll share with this painting is that I had to do it twice, same size, because in my heart, what I wanted, I could not capture the first time. I could not get the sheen to look like a sheen. I couldn't get it to hold. And as a result, I knew when I couldn't go, I knew I couldn't save the painting. And that's the other interesting thing about painting, is you go a certain place or cross a certain line, and then you desperately try to save it. And whether it's semi-abstract or whatever it is, I think abstract's easier personally. I don't like doing it because that's not who I am. But abstract art is usually from the shoulder and not from the hand, although this was a mix. And so abstract art, which this is very, if you think about it, very abstract. In the old days, if you had a slide projector or a projector, and you had a photograph of this, I used to tell people about this, and you had a photograph of this, and you throw it out of focus, it instantly turns abstract. Same thing's true. I used to tell people how they couldn't understand this, and we'd go down a lunch line, cafeteria, thank you. We used to go down a cafeteria line, and you have a tray in front of you, and you put stuff on it. Well, the tray is the frame, and the stuff you put on it is the subject matter. And again, if you had a photograph of that tray with a plate and the silverware and everything on it, where you put it, how you arrange it, how it relates to each other is what we do in design. And the spaces between all those elements doesn't show as much on this piece, although the space between these rocks and the bottom is powerful. And if you take those, back to my example of the cafeteria tray, if you take those pieces and put them in different places, the space between those places is as more important than the pieces themselves. That's how it works, because unless you get the negative space that's called negative space, unless you get that negative space in there, these two don't play against each other. And lots of times, that negative space is so important that it takes over the painting, which is good. Gauguin, for instance, was a classic in doing that kind of work. Van Gogh was the same, and that's one of the reasons we like their work. Their work has a realism to it that we appeal to, a realism that we know about, we can recognize, but they were sharp, they were really good. I love Gauguin, because the spaces in between are what hold and make that painting vibrate and come off the wall. A good painting hung on the wall will demand your attention. When you walk into a room and you see a painting, and that painting holds your attention, it screams at you off the wall. It says, look at me, I am here, I am real, and I am present.